Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. Nearly 2 decades after its release, Korean sci-fi film DWar is making an unexpected comeback on Netflix, reaching a new generation of viewers amid the global K-content boom. But streaming isn't the only story. Audiences are also returning to movie theaters as Korean cinema continues to gain recognition at major international film festivals. So what's behind these changing viewing habits, and what do they tell us about the evolving strength of Korean cinema? For more on this, we connect to Jason Bechervaise, film critic and assistant professor of international affairs at Hanyang University. A big welcome.
Thank you for having me, Mok-yeon.
And also joining us is Marc Raymond, professor of media and communication at Kwangwoon University. Good to see you, Professor.
Good to see you.
So let's start the discussion first with DWar. So nearly 20 years after its release, it's suddenly finding some new audiences on Netflix. Professor Bechervaise, what do you make of this comeback?
Well, I mean, I remember this film coming out back in 2007, I think it was. And, you know, this movie it generated quite a bit of attention, you know, very divisive. Some saw the visual effects as highly, just not good enough. And yet, you know, it still sold, 8 million tickets. And also the director as well, you know, Kim Mok-yeon, he's a comedian. He's been around in the industry for a long time. A lot of Koreans are familiar with him. And he's always found a way to make his films, watchable, I suppose, even if they are quite frankly terrible. And I think what we have here is a film that has found a life, like you said, on the Netflix streaming platform, and people are enjoying this movie where you can kind of you can turn your brain off. It's kind of it's entertaining, and I mean, I was looking at the Netflix charts, and actually it did rise up on Flix Patrol, but if you look at the Netflix charts for the whole week, it didn't quite make the top 10. And the director has also kind of talked about a sequel, and he's used this opportunity to say that a sequel is on the way, although there was confusion surrounding his comments on whether it'd been shot or not. It turns out it has not been filmed, and he's just finished the script. And so we might see another film, but it's also a significant Korean film. It's worth noting, for featuring non-Korean actors. And actually, this director, he was the first director really in Korea to work with foreign actors on this scale. So it's interesting the film has come out now and it's rising up the charts. And the algorithms, of course, do play a role as well.
Right, indeed. So it's quite a comeback after 20 years. Now, like Jason's mentioned, director Kim Hyung-ne, he pointed out on its Korean elements like the imugi or the arirang. Professor Raymond, could the global K-content boom be changing how audiences see DWar today?
Yeah, I think there is definitely this increase in the sort of knowledge, even if it's still fairly superficial, or at least, and also kind of the interest, just maybe more generally in both Korean content and then therefore Korean culture kind of more sort of broadly. And I kind of noticed this even I was in Canada this summer, and I'm now of the age where I have a lot of my friends have teenagers, and a lot of teenagers are just more familiar with Korean. It's mostly through K-pop and disco, and also, of course, something like K-pop Demon Hunters. Everyone knows that, but they go a lot deeper than even, frankly, I do in terms of their knowledge of K-pop and these kind of things. And I do think having that it sort of makes sense that now when they see a Korean movie on Netflix that has some kind of references to Korean cultural concepts or Korean history, things like that, that there's going to be some more sort of interest in that, as opposed to, when this film came out 20 years ago, yes, K-pop was already sort of a thing, but nowhere near the scale that it's at now. So I do think that I think we would it's reasonable to make that kind of connection, that this is maybe driving uh, this sort of unexpected success of this, again, as Jason was saying, almost 20-year-old movie that wasn't very critically acclaimed, to say the least, when it first came out, but is now getting this kind of some attention that it certainly didn't get even at the time internationally.
Right. So more interest in Korea definitely help more people gain interest in Korean films as well, of course. But like we've been mentioning, DWar was quite heavily criticized when it first came out, despite drawing about 8.4 million viewers, moviegoers in Korea. Then do overseas viewers today see the film quite differently from audiences back then, Professor Bechervaise?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, like I say, it's an entertaining movie. I mean, and also monster films. It's a B movie. Like, you know, if you watch some of these kind of B films from Hollywood from the 1970s and 1980s, it doesn't matter if they're bad. In fact, it's quite good if they're bad. You sit there, you kind of laugh at it, and I think, you know, that's what people are enjoying, you know. And I am encouraged that, you know, viewers are watching older content. You know, I was sat on the train coming back from Edinburgh the other day to London, and you know, I could see people, you know, someone next to me watching like films from 20 years ago, and this is great. You know, as much as I like the content that's, you know, that's available on streaming platforms, that's current, I do like the fact that you can watch older stuff. And so even though I'm not a fan of this director and I'm also not a fan of this movie, I kind of, you know, it is great that people are seeking out older content. And I don't think people are necessarily coming out and saying, well, this is an amazing film, but they might say, wow, that was fun. Didn't really make much sense, but you know, who cares?
Right. So I think having all this conversation, maybe I'll have a look over the weekend. But so like we've said, more people have been enjoying this recently. Then, Professor Raymond, do you think the streaming services, it's now giving a chance for older films to have a second life?
Yeah, and there's been actually quite a bit of theorizing on this sort of idea. It's kind of goes back to this idea of the long tail, which was sort of in the early, well, I guess it wasn't that early, but in the early 2000s, you got this sort of idea that was popularized by Chris Anderson, this idea that with the internet, you have this kind of you're not sort of limited by the physical space of, let's say, you know, a bookstore or a video store. That, you know, if you go to Amazon, you go to any of these big companies, you can kind of, there's like this infinite amount of material, and that's going to create, you know, less emphasis on like the big sort of blockbusters and more sort of a wider range of kind of material that people can kind of get to. And the success of something like DWar kind of shows this idea sort of in action, in that, you know, years ago, I mean, if we went back 20 years, we wouldn't be able to, or longer, let's say to the 1990s, you wouldn't really be able to, this movie just would have disappeared completely and just would not have shown up even, given that there was a more limited space back then. Now they're just seeming, we're not sort of limited in that way. So that's sort of one idea. The other, maybe a more negative kind of aspect of this is this idea that was kind of popularized by this cultural critic, Marc Fisher, called sort of the slow erasure of the future, where he kind of said that maybe this is going to lead to less kind of innovation and less kind of emphasis on kind of dealing with the culture now and like new voices into the culture. And what instead we're going to get is just kind of this recycling of the kind of the past. And so you could kind of look at the success of these older films maybe from a more skeptical point, where instead of kind of offering sort of new voices, we're getting less of that. We're getting just this recycling of kind of the past.
So there definitely are pros and cons regarding this, but at the same time, we are also seeing theaters bouncing back to pre-pandemic levels, helped by major blockbusters like Spider-Man and The Odyssey. is this mainly about a few big hits, or are movie-going habits really coming back again?
Yeah, I think there's more. It's more than just blockbusters. Blockbusters are of course driving a lot of it. The Odyssey, Spider-Man, but earlier in the year you had movies like Backrooms and Obsession, very low budget films made by very young filmmakers. The director of Backrooms being only 20, the director of Obsession, a relatively ancient 26. So they are, and they are both people who are coming out of YouTube as well, and from online culture. And I think there's something to this as well. This why we might be seeing more of a this desire to get back to the theaters, I think actually is kind of related to kind of a bit of a decline in online culture, and a kind of there's been again some theorizing about this. The novelist, Canadian novelist and media kind of critic Cory Doctorow has talked about this, how the internet is just getting worse in his opinion, and a lot of others, where big sort of like social media companies like Facebook and even Google are getting sort of overrun by advertisements, getting overrun by AI, bad AI kind of slop, and people are just kind of rejecting that and wanting it, maybe this feeling of it, this desire to kind of go back to the theater. And it's interesting that again, these two big hits are coming out of young people who you would think maybe are just content with being online, but maybe they are now saying, yeah, online culture was great in giving me this start, but I want to do other things. I want to go beyond this and get into kind of theatrical movies. And so I think we are seeing this kind of shift in that direction amongst kind of the younger generation, who, of course, this is the younger generations who fuels movie going in numbers, traditionally, really since, the 1970s.
Right, so it seems it's really entering a new phase as well. Then these younger audiences, they're largely said to be seeing theaters as a place for experience and not just a movie. Professor Bechervaise, what can theaters offer that streaming simply can't?
The collective experience. I know
Wow.
I sound. It's true though. You go there, you want to be around people. Sure, you've got the sound, you've got the big screen, and of course with Odyssey, I'm actually hoping to catch the film on that big IMAX screen in Seoul when I get back, and the tickets are incredibly difficult to get hold of. And so yeah, obviously you've got premium large formats, Screen X, 4DX, and all that is trying to lure audiences back into the theatre. But I think ultimately it's about that collective viewing experience. A good example, I suppose, is Sang-soo that did really well earlier on this year, and sure, that was released on Screen X. I saw that film in Seoul at a press screening on Screen X, but most people went to see the film just in a theatre to watch it with other people and be scared out of their wits. That's you don't get that at home. And if you look at some of the genres that are proving quite resilient to the changes in the ecosystem, it is horror films actually that are doing really well. Backrooms, Obsession, Sang-soo, Scream, I could go on and on and on. And so I do think there's something special about sitting in a theatre with other people and enjoying a film together. It sounds like, pretty obvious, but I do think that what we're seeing at the moment, I think Marc touched on this, is that, people are, yes, many of us were, hooked to social media, kind of doom scrolling. And sometimes I think people just want to take a step back, enjoy, these environments, if you like, and enjoy life. And I think we are seeing a resurgence in, I'm walking around London and I'm seeing like people with like digital cameras, right? People are kind of, maybe it's just people are being nostalgic, and we're tired of just looking at our phones all day, and we want to go back into a theatre and watch a movie with other people. And I think that's something that is really, really special. And if you look at, cinema from its early days, that's ultimately what, has remained consistent, is people watching movies together.
Right, definitely. So, excuse me. So, and again, another thing that I want to talk about is the holdback period between theatrical and streaming releases. What would be the right balance for theaters and streaming platforms to grow together at this point, Professor Raymond?
Yeah, this is a really sort of old question that's been around, really goes all the way back even before things like home video. Actually, if we want to go back to like the 1940s, there was this whole system of what were called runs and clearances, where a movie would play a really big, expensive theater, but then they would hold it for a month or two before they'd release it into the smaller theater, and then it would kind of go further down kind of the line, and then before home video often disappear completely. And then we had sort of the home video era, and I'm sure, sort of older viewers like myself and Jason as well could remember these ideas back when home video in the 90s, you would often wait an extremely long time for a movie once it left a movie theater to get onto home video. And then you'd even have to wait longer you could rent it, but then if you actually want to buy it, you'd have to wait even longer. And I think those days are probably over, but I do think maybe we are getting this sort of this shift where we're maybe pushing back towards maybe we want to have a bit more time for these movies to sort of gain an audience before they get available on video. And I think this is a push towards, the valuing of this movie-going experience. And that's ultimately the question we sort of have to ask, which is that, do we actually want movie theaters to succeed? And I would, of course, answer yes. I think a lot of people we're seeing that moving in that direction. But again, these things kind of ebb and flow. I mean, and during obviously COVID was a big factor here, but during the COVID era, a lot of people were like, "Well, that's it for movie theaters. We're sort of done," and people are kind of moving on, and and maybe it's not something we necessarily value, but that I think is. Like I said, and I think this is connected to these kind of backlashes against, as I mentioned earlier, the internet, online culture, AI. I think there is this kind of idea, well, maybe that's not the future we want. Like maybe we don't want to go that far in that direction. Maybe we do want these collective experiences. Maybe we do want these kind of social aspects. And I think what you're seeing is, governments like Korea, like starting to think, well, maybe we should start to protect these kind of spaces. Maybe they have a social value beyond simply, the box office.
Certainly, certainly. So finding the right balance would be very important moving forward. Now, let's also touch upon a very important news that opened our eyes lately. Hong Sang-soo's Nowhere to Lay My Eyes won 3 awards at Locarno, including Best Direction and Best Performance. And he also won several awards there over the years, including Golden Leopard. Professor Bechervaise, what is it about his films that international critics value so highly?
Hong Sang-soo. I mean, I can't keep up with the guy. He makes what, 2 or 3 films a year. He's the most prolific Korean director there is at the moment. And yeah, I mean, Marc is more of an expert on Hong Sang-soo than I am. But yeah, I mean, it's his minimalist style. It's his kind of, so I guess, Asian minimalism, where he focuses on these kind of everyday details. His films are, very intellectually stimulating. You features characters of walking around these places. His new film is I think set in Jeju, and these characters are often talking about life and relationships, and he plays around with repetition, and you sometimes feel you're watching the same film time and time again. But Hong Sang-soo is someone who he changes it a little bit. He adds this kind of variation. And so he's constantly getting us to kind of reflect on what we've seen before. And I sometimes, when I say to my students, when I introduce them to Hong Sang-soo, I sometimes compare him to like, wine or beer. And there's a deliberate analogy there because, often, in Hong Sang-soo's films, they do feature, alcohol. And, when you first taste these drinks, you don't really like them. You're like, I'll try and keep going. And then ultimately over time, we kind of get, it becomes, it's an acquired taste. And we kind of come, the more we drink, right? And then with Hong Sang-soo, it feels for me the same. It's like when I first watched his films, I remember first watching his movies in London, and it's like, yeah, it's an interesting movie. I don't quite like it. And then over time, as I watch more of him, I'm kind of pulled into these stories, and trying to put together, the jigsaw puzzle. And I've been hooked ever since. And, I think over recent years, Hong Sang-soo has changed, I think. His films have become a bit more optimistic, a bit brighter, a bit shorter as well. I think this latest one is just 72 minutes. I think one critic, Guy Lodge from Variety, he writes, the film is slim, just 72 minutes, but it sticks. Like, I quite like that quote there. And so, and actually just, I haven't seen the film, but, just looking through some of the reviews, and I think that's what, even though if it does feel like a minor work, and yet there's something really quite special about it. And also the performances. Kim Mok-yeon she won Best Performance at the Locarno Film Festival, so it won three awards, including Best Direction. And Hong Sang-soo, how many? I mean, I'd have to ask Marc this. How many Best Director awards has this director won? I mean, his home must be full of these statues, But yes, it's amazing that he's continued to be, awarded in the way that he has done over the last few years. He definitely doesn't seem to be running out of steam, put it that way.
Right. So we have around a minute left. Professor Raymond, do you have anything to add on this?
Yeah, with Hong Sang-soo, it is kind of remarkable that he has stayed kind of as relevant as he has. But I do think it is kind of a little bit of this sort of nostalgia for this kind of art cinema of the past. I mean, I think Hong is probably, of all the international directors, the closest to these directors that kind of emerged in the 60s and 70s, and where you got these, the invention in some ways of what we think of as art cinema, these small independent theaters where people go to see things that are more difficult and kind of more challenging. And Hong has really stayed in that sort of lane, in a way that even Korean directors like Bong Joon-ho and Park Chan-wook and even Lee Chang-dong are kind of more wanting some mainstream success to go with that art cinema success. Hong Sang-soo has kind of completely abandoned that and said, I'm going to focus on festivals. I'm going to focus on art cinema, these art cinema circuits. And it's been remarkably successful at that, and is also, again, so prolific, and he just seems to just want to make movies, and that's it. And that's kind of what he does. He doesn't need these big budgets or things like that. So yeah, very interesting figure. Yeah.
That's what makes us look forward to more of his works moving forward. But very interesting and an entertaining discussion tonight, but we'll have to end it right here. Thank you so much for your insights, Professor Bechervaise and Professor Raymond.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Now, that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.